Our story begins in East LA at the garage where Robbie works, Camelo's Auto and Body. Robbie is working on a sexy, black 1970 Dodge Charger and clearly is enamored with this car. As he's leaving, we see his boss seemingly try to gyp Robbie money owed him in his paycheck, and we learn two things about him. He's nobody's fool, and he doesn't let people take what is owed to him. Outside the Patrick Wellman Development Center, we see a young boy in a wheelchair getting bullied. His wheelchair is stolen by this scumbag squad, led by the chief douche canoe, a dirtbag named Guero. But Robbie swoops in and starts just wailing on these bastards. We see Robbie has no patience for jerks who prey on the innocent and helpless, and he just demolishes the face of one of these asshats. But the young boy calls Robbie's name, and Reyes looks up from the fight to see a gun in his face. The thugs walk off after clearly working Robbie over and leaving him pummeled in the alley and short one wheelchair. It's here we learn the kid is Robbie's little brother, Gabe. Robbie promises Gabe that he'll get him a better wheelchair, and even with a bruised and bleeding face, asks if his little brother is okay. He retrieves Gabe's scattered comics and they head home. And as Gabe is gushing about just how cool Robbie is and how he showed those guys, we see Robbie's shame and frustration clear on his face. That night, Robbie has made dinner in the form of mac and cheese, and Gabe is absolutely loving it. During their meal, gunshots can be heard outside.
Aw, firecrackers. Again?
Yup. Remember, we never go outside when we hear firecrackers. Soon, Gabe. I'll get us out of here soon. Later, we see Robbie sneaking back into the garage. Even here, we can see something sinister surrounds the car as a spectral silhouette is reflected in the windows next to Robbie, and ghostly, invisible flames lick at the racing helmet as he revs up the car and heads out to a street race. There's big money on the line with a grand prize of $50,000 to the winner. Without any money to bet, Robbie shows up and bets the car, a car he doesn't actually own. Clearly, while Robbie's a smart kid, and noble, while perhaps brash, he also knows when he's running out of options, and he plays a big risk. The cars line up, and they roar out of the starting line, and we see Robbie leading the pack. Peeling around tight turns and keeping a strong lead, it looks like that 50 grand is his, and all of his problems will be in the rearview mirror. But when he looks back, he sees the other racers split up, and a helicopter spotlight is on him. He desperately tries to lose his pursuers, images of the consequences of his actions flashing in his mind, images of Gabe crying, left all alone. Robbie ends up cornering himself and accidentally takes a turn into a dead end. Robbie gets out of the car and surrenders with his hands up. All out of options, he drops to his knees. And then he is mowed down by a hail of bullets that shred him into a bleeding corpse left smoking in the alley. The pursuers, dressed in paramilitary garb, douse the car in gasoline and pull duffel bags stuffed with pills from the trunk. On their way out, a match lit by the mercs sends the alleyway into an inferno, engulfing the car in flames. Quickly, the fire consumes Robbie's body. Then, just as his flesh is melted away, Robbie's body rises and roars in hellish rage as his head becomes a blazing skull. The creature Robbie has become gets back into the car, and the inferno of the alley is snuffed as he closes the door, leaving the wheels and engines still spitting hellfire as he rips out of there like a bat out of hell. On the freeway, the mercs unload countless rounds into the blazing muscle car, roaring towards them. One of them fires a rocket at the Hell Charger, which sends it tumbling through the sky in a forward flip, which then lands back right side up and gaining ground. The troopers gawk in horror as the rider shifts gears and pulls up alongside their truck, slamming into it, shredding it in two. As the riders careen off the overpass, the Hell Charger erupts into flame, seemingly exploding, and then vanishing. 3 of the Merc trucks escape, with the one left behind in twisted, burning slag. The mercenaries return to a warehouse in Palmdale, where they report to a manic-looking scientist named Dr. Zabo, who chatters to himself as much as to his soldiers. He suggests that they celebrate the return of his defective pills. Toasting a drink with the lead mercenary, Dr. Zabo leads him to a back room, mentioning that he noticed the missing 17th bag. A blood-curdling scream can be heard after the door closes, and when it opens, we see Dr. Zabo has undergone a grisly transformation into a bestial monster, Mr. Hyde. An old enemy of the original Ghost Rider, Mr. Hyde puts a merc named McCallum in charge, tasking him and the remaining soldiers to track down and retrieve the missing bag, punctuating the cost of failure by spitting out the previous leader's eye and giving it to McCallum. Robbie wakes up back home, his memory a blur. The events of last night seem to be just a bizarre nightmare, and he decides to get ready for school. He notices that one of his eyes have changed from green to orange, and the beginnings of a V-shaped scar have started on his brow. Meanwhile, in Hill Rock Heights, we meet a gangster and drug dealer known as Grumpy. He has the 17th duffel bag of Zabo's monster pill, and he's been hawking it as a roofie drug to lowlives at his house party in the middle of the day. Classy guy, this Grumpy fella. As a pair of skis buckets drop what they believe to be a roofie into a woman's drink at Grumpy's party, a ragged-looking addict informs Grumpy that he saw the gangster's black muscle car at a race last night, and it's here we learn that Robbie's Hellcharger belongs to Grumpy, but that still doesn't explain its mystical power. When Robbie goes to work, he sees the charger is back where he left it, and during his shift he can't keep his eyes off it as his mind starts turning as to what really happened last night. At Grumpy's party, the girl the previously mentioned skis buckets attempted to roofie is looking groggy, and when they attempt to take her someplace more discreet, she says no, and in a very satisfying and righteous move, hulks out due to the effects of the monster pill and proceeds to brutalize the would-be suitors and trashes the party using the thugs as batons. Later that night, we see Robbie playing action figures with Gabe and listening to a story from his little brother's day before putting him to bed. Robbie, however, can't seem to find sleep and goes back to the garage again to put his mind at ease. As Robbie is taking the charger out, Grumpy's thugs arrive to retrieve it for their boss. Seeing Reyes apparently attempting to steal their boss's car, the thugs don't hesitate to pull their guns and unload at him. A black-gloved hand reaches out amidst the gunfire, and Robbie is the rider once more. The bullets bounce off him harmlessly, and he grabs the gangster's gun hand, crushing it in his own to a splintered lump of bone and flesh, before punching him clear through the windshield of their car. The rider kicks in the knee of the other thug and watches as they drive away. The rider looks over to the Hellcharger, which opens its door to him, and he saddles up, streaking hellfire down the highway as he chases after the panicking thugs. But instead of dealing with them, he roars past, leaving a streak of fire in his wake. Making his way to a salvage yard, the rider exits the car and becomes Robbie once more. As he looks at his reflection in the hood of this mysterious car, he sees the image of the blazing skull looking back at him. What are you?
No, the real question is, what are we?
The spectral form of the blazing skull tells Robbie that they are kindred spirits. Its name is Eli Morrow, a human spirit killed by lowlives like Robbie was. A human spirit with the power to have brought him back to life last night. Eli wants to help Robbie fight back against all the gangsters and bullies. He wants to give him power. All that he asks is that Robbie get in the car and trust him, and he will give Reyes the power to take a new life for him and his little brother. But Robbie hesitates. He asks, how does he know he can trust Eli? In response, the spirit ignites the car and charges Robbie. But just at the moment it would slam into Reyes, he is the rider again, and the car phases through him. Eli says that he, Robbie, and the car are one and the same. After initial shock, Robbie decides to take the power Eli offers to fight back and change his and Gabe's life, and he phases into the driver's seat of the car. Later the next day, Robbie returns to work at the garage and arrives to a macabre scene. Camelo and all the other workers have been shot, and blood pools all around him as he calls 911 for help. Eli's voice tells Robbie that he knows who is responsible and offers to help find them and bring them to vengeance. Once again, only asking for Robbie's trust. Reyes, swept up in his rage and frustration, tells Eli that he trusts him. Fire spits from his eyes and head, but he realizes quickly that the car isn't there. Robbie's rage begins to transform him into the rider. As flames curl around him, his flesh melts. He asks how they can get to the car, and the wall of the garage starts to thrum with the sound of a familiar engine. Becoming the rider once more, Robbie phases through the wall and disappears, just as the paramedics arrive for Camelo and those remaining in the shop. Back at Grumpy's house, his thugs have returned the car after murdering everyone at Camelo's. As Grumpy is berating his lackeys, we see Zabo's mercenaries have encircled the house and make their move. A thunderous boom shatters the windows and walls, and they crumble as the mercs storm into Grumpy's house, weapons drawn. As they mark their targets, they open fire. The hideout becomes a slaughterhouse as Zabo's men rip through Grumpy's crew with automatic fire. Grumpy dives for cover, and after seeing the chick Hulk out at his party, in desperation, he chucks a handful of the pink pills into his mouth. We now see Grumpy and two of his goons have escaped McCallum in the merc ambush, making their getaway in the black Charger. Grumpy is bleeding badly in the back, and while his driver and other cohort talk about how he threw the whole sofa at the soldiers after taking the pills, we see a skull start to pull its way from the roof of the car, its eyes burning red. As the skull pulls further out from the car, it fumes hellfire as Robbie listens to the gangsters laugh and reminisce on how they brutalized and shot Camelo and everyone at the shop. Finally emerging, the rider roars and stops the car in its tracks. Phasing his arms through the roof, the rider pulls the two thugs from the car, and the Charger ignites into a hellfire light show as pillars of fire pierce the sky like spears of rage and malcontent. He hurls one of them into the air and proceeds to box the face of the other in until only a bloody pulp remains of the goon's face. As the thrown gangster plummets back to the earth, the rider raises a knee, catching the falling thug in the throat with a crushing cracoom. Tossing down his defeated and bloody foes like so much garbage, the car begins to shake. Suddenly, Grumpy, now massive and bestial with the pills taking full effect, rips his way out of the roof of the car and menacingly roars at Robbie.
You, I'm gonna fuck you up.
As Grumpy tears his way out of the Hell Charger, Eli encourages Robbie to destroy him, annihilate him. After all, look what he did to their beautiful car. As Robbie lunges at Grumpy with a hellish roar, he's caught by the gargantuan gangster's foot as he kicks into the rider's face. Clearly showing his fighting skill and newfound strength, Grumpy follows up with a leaping elbow to catch the falling rider and slam him into the asphalt, which crunches like tortilla under the force of the monstrous blow. Continuing his brutal assault, Robbie begins to panic and ask Eli what he should do. In response, the Hell Charger revs up in flames and charges the two as they fight, phasing through the rider and crashing into Grumpy. Robbie flips over him and puts the bestial brute in a chokehold. But to Robbie's horror, the pills have further mutated Grumpy with an additional pair of arms, which pop out of him and grab Robbie's head, hurling him to the ground. Tossing aside the car, Grumpy pummels Robbie into the street with an earth-shattering quadruple punch, which leaves the rider smoldering in a crater. Eli provides only one comfort.
Carry them all, kid. But we'll get there. We're getting stronger every day.
The next morning, Robbie shaves his head and sees new scars appearing on his scalp. Eli explains that their bond is becoming stronger, making them more powerful than before. Gabe interrupts the inner dialogue and compliments his older brother in his cool new look. Robbie laughs and gives Gabe a high five, saying, "Not as cool as you, bro." Not as cool as you. Back in Palmdale, at the hideout of Dr. Zabo, the mad scientist argues with himself as he ponders on the error of his pink pill. He realizes he made an oversight. He realizes that by upping the dosage in the pill, it will make up for the imbalance it created in its subjects and make his soldiers a much more formidable force. He embarks on a plan to create his new blue pill. Later, we catch up with Robbie as he takes Gabe for a ride in the new car. Gabe expresses how much he loves it and says the car looks so awesome. And Eli mentions that the kid has surprisingly good taste. Robbie asks his hermano if he wants to get some ice cream, to which Gabe gets extremely excited and exclaims his love for ice cream. Robbie knows and starts going into the ice cream monster bit they have done so many times to Gabe's amusement. We then see Guero and the Goon Squad lounging at a street corner, taking turns in Gabe's wheelchair, when McCallum and the other mercenaries roll up in their trucks. McCallum asks Guero and his friends about Grumpy and if they know where to find him. Guero tells them that they ain't talking unless they're paying. When McCallum barks back with threats, Zabo intercedes, stepping out of the vehicle.
Now, no need for the exchange of harsh, hurtful words, gentlemen. Young man, is it merely money you seek, or do you desire real power?
Guero smirks and responds he'll settle for both. Zabo pays the small gang a stack of cash, as well as an invitation to his growing organization for the info on where to find Grumpy and the missing bag of pills. At the same corner, Robbie pulls up and Gabe points out his wheelchair. Robbie begins to seethe with anger and Eli can sense it. He urges Robbie to do it. Give Guero and his lowlife buddies the beating they so richly deserve. After all, the chair belongs to Gabe. He has every right to take it back, and in brutal fashion. But Robbie holds his temper just long enough for the light to change, and he refocuses on getting Gabe ice cream, and not vengeance, as he drives away. As he does, Zabo completes his deal with Guero, and sets off to find Grumpy and his remaining defective pills. The board is set, its players ready, and Zabo leans back in the paramilitary truck.
Mistake common civility for mere weakness with Dr. Zabo. Endure incredibly atrocious brutality and rage with Mr. Hyde. You've made us very angry, Grumpy. And for that, Hill Rock Heights will burn.
Catching up with Robbie and Gabe, now enjoying their ice cream, Robbie confides in Eli just how much he hates this place. He wants Gabe to be safe, and to do that they need to get out. Eli responds by telling Robbie to ignite the change in his community that he wants to see, by literally burning down every drug corner and gang hideout, scorching the evil at its source. Receiving a call from the garage, Robbie is offered extra money to pick up a shift. Desperate for the extra cash, Robbie asks Mrs. Valenzuela over the phone if she could watch Gabe after school while he goes to work. As they leave the house, Gabe comments on the fight and crowd surrounding it outside and asks why they were fighting. Eli says it's because all people, are rubbish. And Robbie starts to wonder if the spirit isn't all wrong. With Guero's information, Zabo and his men have tracked down Grumpy and engaged him. Zabo decides to deal with the gangster himself. Grumpy laughs in the tiny man's face, asking what he plans to do to him. Zabo calmly drinks his formula and transforms into Mr. Hyde. Grumpy panics and attempts to shovel more pills down his gullet, but in one swift motion, Mr. Hyde grabs him, breaks his back, and then effortlessly shreds him cleanly in two. Blood and pills rain from the sky as Hyde takes the last bag of pills. He tells McCallum that tomorrow they strike against the other hideouts and send a strong message to all the other gangs. Act against Dr. Zabo. Meet the wrath of Mr. Hyde. The next day arrives, and it doesn't take long for the mercenaries to locate the rest of Grumpy's goons, who have found Guero spending his snitch money. Tensions are high, and quickly, the gangs and soldiers open fire into the crowded street. Robbie, working at the garage, gets a call that there's a gang shootout in Hill Rock Heights near his house. Suddenly, he remembers Gabe isn't at school because Mrs. Valenzuela was going to babysit him, and she lives in the same neighborhood. On the school bus to Mrs. Valenzuela's, Gabe is enjoying a comic when the bus driver coasts right into the crossfire of the chaos. In an attempt to get them to safety, she cuts hard in the steering wheel, but the unwieldy bus hits the curb and tips onto its side, crashing into the middle of the street. Screeching through traffic to get to Gabe comes Robbie, teeth gritted in worry and frustration. Back at the shootout, Guero is trying to convince his buddies to leave the bus and get the hell out of Dodge, further cementing his place as king of the crap baskets. But his friends, while jerks, refuse to abandon the kids trapped in the tipped-over bus. Gabe is the last to be helped out, and just as he's being lifted out from the bus, Grumpy's last standing thug cracks Guero in the face with the butt of his pistol, and just before he is executed, the gangster is shot through the forehead by McCallum. McCallum draws next on Guero. Gabe throws himself over Guero, yelling at McCallum not to hurt him. Before McCallum can pull the trigger, Robbie leaps into the fray once more, just in the nick of time. This time, however, he arrives as the Rider. The Hell Charger turns hard and Robbie phases out from the side, chains whirling out and capturing McCallum. The Rider leaps forward with his momentum and overhead slams the murderous merc into the pavement with a bone-shattering kathoom! Robbie turns his attention to Gabe, picking him up. Gabe waves at the Rider with a huge grin.
So cool! You came to save us all!
The trunk of the Charger pops open, and the Rider gently lowers Gabe inside, where he phases through and is teleported to the wall of the garage and safe from danger. Looking out over the chaos of the street in front of him, Robbie's thoughts are scattered. As he stares at the violence, he is faced with a choice of how to proceed. Two voices, Eli and his teacher from school, ring in his mind.
I can hear you thinking, kid. Don't go soft on me.
Some people require time and patience to find their way. Reprimanding them is not always the solution.
Robbie, that's nonsense. Wipe them all out.
Can I count on you to bring about progress? To use the power within you to ignite change in your community?
Burn this place down. That's how we ignite real change.
So cool! You came to save us all! You're my hero, Robbie. Save us all!
With the memory of his brother clear in his mind, Robbie makes his choice. Zabo's men see the Rider and mark their target, unleashing a missile towards him. Robbie quickly spins his bladed chain and expertly strikes the nose of the missile, causing it to explode in front of the mercenaries. Without skipping a beat, Robbie swings his chain and catches all of the mercs in midair from the force of the explosion. He yanks them toward him. Robbie slams them into submission onto the ground. The crowd, watching all this unfold, cheers for the Rider. The fight isn't over yet, however, and leaping from on high out of a helicopter, Mr. Hyde lands on the scene. Having tangled with the original Ghost Rider in the past, he mistakes Robbie for Johnny Blaze, but notices that something's different about him. Something smells off. Wasting no time, Reyes hurls his chain at the beast, but Hyde catches it with inhuman speed, using it against Robbie to slam him through the wreckage of the bus.
No, you're clumsy, unskilled, and weak. You're not him. You're not the Ghost Rider.
Beaten, confused, and running out of time, Robbie wonders what this monster is going on about. Who the hell is the Ghost Rider? But Eli tells him to focus on not dying. Just before the lights are extinguished, Robbie summons the health charger, and it sweeps out Hyde's legs from under him. Thudding to the ground, Robbie leaps up and delivers a punishing double kick to Hyde's face. Just as Hyde is about to get up, he is kept down as the car drives over his head and does a hellfire burnout over his face. Frustrated and running out of options, Hyde grabs a handful of pills from a pouch on his belt. Ignoring Zabo's protests, Hyde guzzles down the pink monster pills and suddenly grows even more titanic. Looming over the street and Robbie, he lifts a gargantuan fist overhead and readies to slam down on Robbie. As the crowd watches in horror, all of a sudden, Hyde's expression changes from glee to horror. The pills clash with the serum already present in Hyde's system, and he retches violently from the overdose. Hyde's body warps and twists as the chemicals rage inside him, and soon, Zabo is left a whimpering, sweaty heap in Hyde's crater. As sirens blare and the crowd moves in on the disheveled Zabo, the rider drives away. Later, at the hideout of Guero and his friends, the gang of youths are discussing the fight. Impressed by how badass the Blazing Skull Rider fought, they go on in their drunk revelry. Suddenly, the lights go out, and like a phantom, Robbie appears as the Rider. He is silent and glares at the gang that stole his brother's wheelchair and beat him to a pulp in that alleyway. Guero sees the Rider eyeing the wheelchair and foolishly brags to him about how they took it from a little handicapped kid, laughing about the whole ordeal. The Rider's flames flare up. Darkness takes the space, and only the sound of Guero and his buddies getting pummeled can be heard. Leaving with the wheelchair and Guero's gang beaten on the ground, Reyes rides off, hellfire licking from the pavement, as the all-new Ghost Rider drives into the setting sun.